Hi everyone. In the last video we spoke about Watchtower propaganda that feeds anti-intellectualism among Jehovah's Witnesses. Another factor that enables propaganda to work is isolation of Jehovah's Witnesses to outside influences. This is a point that's made in Terence Qualter's book called Propaganda and Psychological Warfare. Just wanted to read to you in his introduction. He makes this point. The weapon of the dictator is not so much propaganda as censorship. The propaganda menace lies not in the volume or the methods of propaganda, but in a monopoly control over the means of communication, to the exclusion of all propaganda hostile to the established order. Propaganda is a firmly established force in the political life of every modern state. Contrary to popular belief, it need not be a menace to the working of a system of representative democracy, for it is not propaganda that threatens the independence of the individual mind and creates a conditioned mass, but a monopoly control over the means of propaganda in the conditions of a closed society. It is the absence of the stimulus of conflicting ideas and of any alternative policies that result in an unquestioning uniformity of public opinion in the modern dictatorship. The protection of democracy, therefore, lies not in attempts to restrict or control the activities of propagandists, but in providing the means for the propagation of all points of view. So it's the exclusive only one point of view that's the problem. Censorship, a closed society. Witnesses are often not thought of as a closed society, but they are cut off from all other points of view. They only read and listen to the Watchtower for the most part. As witnesses, we often heard Proverbs 18:1 being used about isolating oneself as being missing meetings or drawing away from the organization. But we as Jehovah's Witnesses isolate ourselves from all those outside the org. We don't listen to or hear anyone else's point of view. It was isolation that formed the beginnings of the Watchtower as an organization. Let's read some of the other verses in Proverbs 18. Very informative about what this is about. Proverbs 18:1 and 2. A man who isolates himself seeks his own desire. He rages against all wise judgment. A fool has no delight in understanding, but in expressing his own heart. So did we listen only to ourselves? Or did we listen to anyone else? Okay, and then in verses 12 to 15 of the same chapter 18, it reads, Before destruction the heart of a man is haughty, and before honor is humility. He who answers a matter before he hears it, it is folly and shame to him. The spirit of a man will sustain him in sickness, but who can bear a broken spirit? The heart of the prudent acquires knowledge, and the ear of the wise seeks knowledge. Are Jehovah's Witnesses humble as a people? Did we listen, or did we only speak? Did we think we needed to keep learning, or did we think we knew? I would have to say as a witness, I thought I had the answers. I thought I knew. I did not go from door to door thinking other people knew things or had any insights. I had to teach them. Then verse 17 reads, "The first one to plead his cause seems right until his neighbor comes and examines him." So did we try to understand anyone else's point of view? Or did we only listen to the one point of view and not want to hear anyone else's point of view? Did we ever think we could learn from someone else? This case history that we're going to read is about a girl who grew up in the Witnesses and the problems that anti-intellectualism and isolation led to in her life. So here we've got her only being represented as M. While in high school, M excelled in the study of literature and writing. She spent a great deal of time writing stories, many of which, according to her teachers, were extremely well done. For a short time, she entertained ideas of going to college to major in literature. But as both her parents had been witnesses since she was 4, they quickly talked her out of this ambition. Feeling that any ambition in this area were worldly, she felt guilty about her desire to write. Yet she secretly dreamed of becoming a writer, feeling there was no harm in just dreaming. Evidently, she did not experience guilt over what she called her secret thoughts. After graduation from high school, she pioneered for several months, but soon became very depressed and listless. She then seriously entertained the idea of going back to school to study literature or writing. Again, social pressure from the congregation dissuaded her from this ambition. Her overseer explained that spending time in this pursuit, which was defined as selfish, would cause her to be blood guilty. She was encouraged to spend as much time as possible warning others of Armageddon. To take away time from this most important activity and spend it in selfish pursuits was viewed as a gross sin. If she went to college, blood guilt may be upon her for those lives that were lost due to her negligence in preaching the Watchtower message. In other words, she should be going from door to door instead of college. She soon began to dislike the door-to-door activity. She became depressed until she met a young man who gave her an acceptable way out of her problems: marriage. After a short courtship, she married him, also a pioneer, which made him acceptable to her in her parents' eyes. Unfortunately, though, she became pregnant shortly after they were married. Although some criticism of this surfaced because both she and her husband had to give up pioneering, they were generally accepted in the congregation, in spite of what was felt to be an immaturity on their part, her becoming pregnant. The witnesses feel that now is not the time to have children because the end is too close. Then in brackets he's got, this was in the early 1950s. Because marriage is often, this is his own comments, because marriage is often the only acceptable alternative to full-time service, both full-time working and schooling beyond high school are frowned upon. Witnesses tend to marry quite young. The majority of witness girls marry before the age of 20 or 21. The couple were only following the pattern typical of witnesses. And then back to her story. It says, the first few years of the marriage, her creative activity was channeled into her young family and home. As her family needed her less and less, her creative energy sought other outlets. Here, her conflict between her desire to pursue literature and write again led to an impasse which caused various emotional problems. The elders diagnosed her problem as demon-caused. She was soon forced to sell her prized collection of antiques that she had inherited from her grandmother. The elders concluded that one of them must have been the source for the demons that they were sure were bothering her. As this did not solve the problem, they assumed there must be something else in her house, which was demonized. Consequently, the elders made her destroy her small library of books, most of which she used in high school or bought at garage sales. And then it says, still the symptoms did not abate. So her husband finally suggested she seek psychiatric help. He felt her problems could be organic. This she finally did, but is so burdened with guilt and hostility that progress has been slow. At last count, she was divorced and living with her parents, torn between her religion and normal needs, and doing little to improve herself in either area. And then he makes this comment: the above situation involving suppression of creativity is fairly common. The writer has worked with scores of witnesses in whom frustrated expressions of real talent resulted in emotional problems. So even if we are thinking that the witnessing work was the reason why they thought she shouldn't go to college, what else did it accomplish, this prohibition of schooling, college and university education? It accomplished isolation. Schooling would not eliminate a person from speaking of their faith, and they'd actually be sure that the person was there if they're going to school with them. Whereas when you go door to door, frequently it's nobody home. But it would prevent you from hearing opposing points of view and observing other people's convictions about life and their thinking. All that would be not something you would get. Because we limit service to Watchtower activities only, one is frequently disabled in using God-given talents and abilities in service to God and love of neighbor. If you have a talent, you can use it to serve God. I'm going to link to 2 videos. One is Why Propaganda Works with Jehovah's Witnesses and Other Cultists. Dictators Create Closed Societies, and that's based on David's review of the book we started with, Qualter. And the second video is JW's Victimized by Classic Propaganda Methods. Suppress Inconvenient Truths. And that was based on some readings that David and I were doing from Ray Franz's book, In Search of Christian Freedom.